Today was the Feast of Dragons in Dragonvale, and it was a very special holiday like Christmas. The Feast of Dragons is where everyone gathered with friends and family. The school had the Feast of Dragons holiday off for the students, with the exception of Celeste and her father, with Lydia, Zach, Haley, Robert, and Jack with his mother. Celeste was in her bedroom, finding a nice dress to wear for the Feast of Dragons. "Well, what do you think, Lydia?" Celeste asked as she appeared from her wardrobe. Celeste was wearing a nice red dress. "It looks good on you, Celeste. I got my fancy blouse and pants to wear," Lydia replied. "I'm glad we found clothes to wear. Father also said we need to bring something for the party," Celeste said as she looked through her chest that was near her bed. Then she looked through the chest, and within a few minutes, she found something to bring to the party in the dinner hall. "I found this. It's a dragon decoration for the table." "I wonder how that got here," Lydia wondered. "I must have been packed in here for a long time, and I finally found it," Celeste said as Lydia brushed her hair. "Are you excited for dinner tonight?" "Why, yes I am, Celeste. Why wouldn't I be?" Lydia asked as she continued to brush Celeste's hair. The Feast of Dragons is kind of like Thanksgiving in Canada and the USA, but in Dragonvale, we called it the Feast of Dragons, as we celebrate the time of the dragons feast with the mages. But since we're having a special dinner, and this happens once a year, "I bet the food is gonna be yummy," Celeste said. "Yes, it will be yummy. Which reminds me, we should all head down to the dining hall to meet up with everyone else," Lydia reminded Celeste as the girls headed downstairs of the school. Once they were on the lower section of the school, they headed up to the entrance hall and the enchanted walkway. They soon arrived at the dining hall, which was mostly empty except for a large table that was set up in the middle of the room. "Thank you, Jack," Nancy said to her son as she fixed up his bow tie. "Not a problem, Mom," Jack replied. "Nancy, can you come help check on the food?" Nathaniel called from the kitchen as Nancy left to check on the food. "Hey, honey. Look what me and Lydia brought for the feast. It's a dragon decoration for candles." "What did you bring?" Celeste asked. "I bought some dragon napkins, stuff to go with the table setup," Jack said as Zach, Haley, and Robert showed up. "Hey, Zach, Robert, and Haley," Lydia said as her friends walked in while looking fancy in nice clothes. "Hiya, Lydia." "Hey, Jack," Zach said. "Hey, girls. Glad you're both here," Robert said. "Glad to see you all," Haley said, as Nancy and Nathaniel both set up the table. "Okay, you guys, table is set," Nathaniel said. "I can't wait to see what dinner is this year's feast is going to be," Robert wondered. "Every year for the Feast of Dragons, I like to serve a meal that has organic vegetables from my garden. So we're going to have vegetable stew, garden casserole, carrot pot pie, baked potatoes, and for dessert, we'll have berries and cream," Nancy said. "That looks yummy already. Is there going to be chicken or turkey with it?" Haley asked. "There's chicken in the food, so we'll be having with the vegetables," Nancy said. "I can't wait to eat," Zach said, as everyone sat down on the table. Even Lampert was at the dinner table. "Here's some candles for the dragon decoration," Zach added as he placed the candles on Celeste's dragon decoration. Nancy, everyone has a plate. Why did you put out an extra one?" Celeste asked. "Oh, this plate? Well, Celeste, this is the special plate for me to remember all the people who can't be here for dinner, and for those who have to spend the Feast of Dragons alone. See the pictures around the rim? All those pictures tell a story," Nancy explained. "A story? I didn't think we've heard one of that before," Lydia said. "You betcha. And this is the story of the first Feast of Dragons," Nancy replied as she began to tell the story to her friends and family. "It was 400 years ago, 100 years after Dragonvale Academy was built. It was in a town and a time when there wasn't enough food for everyone. It was during a time where everyone was really hungry. People started fighting amongst themselves, blaming each other for how hungry everyone was. While things were looking really bad, a group of mages were just passing through. They looked at the townspeople fighting each other and they said, 'That's not right. People shouldn't fight when times are bad. They should help each other.' The mages gathered around the townspeople and announced a message to them: "Come to the feast." A feast? With what? How can there be a feast if there wasn't any food? The townspeople were confused by this, so the mages invite the townspeople to a table where the mages pretended to have a feast. People stopped their fighting and began to join the mages that claimed that this day on will be the Feast of Dragons. Why it was called that? Well, that was because the dragons were present at the time and still are today. The townspeople brought the food that they had left: meat, dairy, vegetables, and other things. They looked around and they realized that they had enough food for everyone, and it became a real feast. Together every year, friends and family gathered around and they celebrate the Feast of Dragons, just like Thanksgiving. And from that day on, they all agreed to do the same thing every year, to remember the days where there wasn't much food, and to celebrate the days when there was plenty. And that's how the Feast of Dragons began. And every year we have a Feast of Dragons to remember the hard days when it happened many years ago. And that is why we're all here together, Nancy said. Not everyone's here. Lila is not here. If she was, she would have sat not far from where Nathaniel is, Lydia replied sadly. We know you miss your cousin Lila. We do too, as a friend, Zach assured Lydia. I know it isn't the same as having your cousin here, Lydia, Robert said. Then there was a sound of a door opening from the dinner hall. Lila walked in the dinner hall, and she was surprised to see everyone at the table. Hey, you guys! I entered the school front entrance not too long ago and was wondering where you all were, Lila said. She greeted her friends. Lydia ran up to Lila and gave her a big hug. I'm so glad you're here, Lila. We were thinking that you weren't going to show up, Lydia said in amazement. Hey, girl, I'm here now, so you have nothing to worry about. I love to come visit my cousin whenever I want, even during the holidays, Lila said, as the stovetop timer in the kitchen went off. That's the stovetop timer. The food is all cooked and finished, Nathaniel said as he and Nancy headed to the kitchen to get the food that was cooking. Talk about good timing. Good thing I showed up, Lila said as she and her friends all paraded around the table while Nathaniel and Nancy placed the food on the table. Once the parading was finished, everyone sat to their seats. Boy, this looks great, Robert said. This sure looks good enough to eat, Zach replied. Ready to dig in the food? Jack asked. We should all say grace before we eat, Nancy says, as she said grace and gave prayers. After that was over, everyone began to dig in the food. After the big dinner everyone had, Celeste with her family and friends were stuffed. They sure had a lot to eat that day, and they would have to admit that this year's Feast of Dragons was the best one they had this year.